G'day everyone, Viv here, hope you're all keeping well. No face on the camera today. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'll talk about this building in more detail later on, but more specifically this texture and this brick pattern here. How to achieve it, how I've done it, and some different ways of doing it. I've got two small little slides here. They're various different sizes of brick patterns. But you can see the texture there, that plaster, how it actually has depth. It's broken away from the brickwork on both of these samples. The brickwork on this is slightly bigger. This one I did by hand, so to speak. And this one here I used a little technique. I can't remember where I learnt it, but it was a number of years ago and I've never really used it much. And I'm going to show you that technique, just in case you're not very good with a putty knife and can't get that sort of depth to the plaster where it's actually cracked away from the brickwork. So I've got a little slide here with 3 different pieces of foam core on it. It's the same foam core, and I've removed the plastic, the paper backing or the paper surface of the foam core to just expose the foam. So I'm going to carve into one of these a brick pattern, and we're going to create this, this chipped texture here that you see on this slide. I'm going to make my brick pattern much larger than my chip is actually going to be, and that helps the bricks blend in a little bit. It's much easier to do this before you put your plaster work on, and obviously if you're working on a whole building, it's the same. So there we go. Don't know what we can see there, but there's our pattern. Now we just need to emphasize it with our sculpting tool. So there we go. You can see it's much deeper now. I like to take a texturing rock, which I didn't list in our tools, but just a little rock just to roll across the surface. Just to give a little bit more texture to those bricks. Sometimes when you do that, you'll need to come back with your sculpting tool and just redefine the lines. So there we go, I'm happy with that now. I've got some detail on those bricks. The sizes of these bricks are probably a little bit too big for 28mm, but just for the sake of the video. Okay, so next, another thing I didn't list in our material, some painter's tape or masking tape. I'm going to rip off a small piece of it, and then I'm just going to rip it into a shape. Weirdly enough, that kind of looks like a back to front Australia. But there we go. Now all I need to do is crease one corner of this just a little bit and stick it to itself, and then simply stick this onto my pattern. So that's what I end up with. Now we're going to apply spackle to this, some wall filler, stucco, whatever you call it. So just some multi-purpose wall filler, spackle, stucco, I don't know what you call it. I've also got a knife which I've bent into like a little trowel, and all we're going to do is take some of this wall filler and spread it on here. what I do want to find is that little edge that we taped together. It's just there. And I want to go underneath that. I like to take a little bit of water with my finger and just smooth off this surface. Depending, of course, on the texture that you want to have. So we'll be left with something that's got a whole bunch of swirl marks in it. When this dries a little bit, I'll come back and buff it with my finger again. So we'll come back when we're ready for that. Whilst we wait for our first slide to dry, I've gone ahead and done the brick pattern and textured up the second tile. So same deal, same brick pattern. And this time we're just going to apply the spackle. We don't need to worry about masking it off. We're just going to do it by hand. We'll leave that bit there. We'll grab that in a second. And it's just a matter of sort of being careful with your knife work. Our first slide will be almost ready, just to sort of, nope, still a bit wet. Just to dry sand essentially the swirl marks. So that's what we've ended up with our, second slide. I must apologise for the crappy camera work. Okay, so our first plate is dry. You can see, hopefully, that there's swirl marks, fingerprints, etc. All we're going to do is just buff it with a dry finger. If you get more swirl marks in it, it means the plaster is still too wet and you need to wait a little bit longer. There we go, smoothed off a little bit. Camera work on this video is shocking, but no more fingerprints, no more swirl marks. It is slightly undulated like plaster that's been sort of fairly crudely applied would be. I have gone ahead on the second tile, I couldn't help myself. I added some cracks and all that sort of stuff just with the end of the sculpting tool, which is easier if you do it the second way because you can see where the brickwork finishes and the plaster starts, whereas if you're doing it this way you can't really see that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead now and remove this piece of tape. You'd probably want to wait for a little bit longer, but I can't be bothered, so I'm just going to lift up an edge. There we go, we got one corner that lifted up a little bit because the plaster wasn't dry. This corner right there. But you can see that we've got that three-dimensional texture. Very simple to do, very easy to do. I think I prefer the second method because it's quicker. You don't have to stuff around with putting that piece of tape in there, and I don't know. I prefer the second one. But that's just me. And then carefully with my sculpting tool, messing around, which is not really part of what this tutorial's for. I just can't help myself. Just gently put in a couple of cracks. And when that dries, you'll just be able to buff that with your hand, and you'll take off any extra sort of surface material, if that makes sense. There we go. I'm done. probably one of the worst tutorials I've done. But I like the second effect. It's easier, it's quicker, but ultimately at the end of the day, you can see I haven't polished this one with a dry finger. And I don't know if you can see in some areas the brickwork still shows through. Certainly on this piece, if you can see, the brickwork here is still showing through. So you know there's brickwork underneath there. That's just because the plaster layer is so thin. Anyway, there's another quick tutorial for everybody. Might be useful, might not. I'll catch you soon. See ya.